Thank you for joining me again. Today, I want to talk more about corruption in academia and particularly where it's leading us to as a culture. So, a psychologist in training by the name of Eleanor Morgan has stated that most people identifying as transgender only want safety and respect and are not wanting a fight. Now, she may have a point there that maybe the majority of trans people don't want to fight, but a large percentage of them actually do. And she begins her discussion with this idea, the false premise that for as long as the human species has existed, there have been trans people. Now, in order to understand this being a false premise, stay tuned because the trans people believe that they have been around forever, but they never are identified. So I'm not sure anyone's really clear about what transgender means. And perhaps that's not an accident. The umbrella term of trans identity covers an array of expressed sexual proclivities, from fetishes to disorders of sexual development, and now over 100, supposedly, gender identities. And there's no test for these identities. If you have something, you're born with some kind of different deformity that isn't observable, or there's something wrong internally, there are tests for such things. But there isn't a test for being trans. 10 years ago, no one had an identity. And we really didn't care. Now, I mean, there were transsexual people, and a very small percentage. And those are people that had, well, it's all under the transgender umbrella now. But, anyways, the point is that we didn't have identities 10 years ago, and we weren't really concerned about it. But now, everybody is getting one, and you either get one or you have one, or you can maybe be assigned one by the trans activists. Men and women have been reduced to identities as opposed to material realities, all under the trans umbrella. I don't know about you, but I don't want to be reduced. uh, there was a thing called women's lib a long time ago, and women fought for certain freedoms and certain equalities. And now we're all being lumped into a trans ideology, men and women. It's not just women. So, but there's this ongoing drone of propaganda. You hear it all over. You see it now so much of television shows, which I don't watch, but I have heard and seen a little enough to know that almost every sitcom now has a trans individual. Anyways, this propaganda would have us believe that there are special humans that are neither male nor female, and that these people can override any sex that they had or have and become the opposite sex. Actually, it's very stereotypical because they talk about um, changing gender, and it's all confused, gender and sex, by the way. I'm not going to get into that today, but um, yeah, that they can override biological sex and become what they want to be. That's a delusion. It's called a delusion. The family unit is declared transphobic and must be abolished. So a trans identifying person named Jules Gleason insists that the family unit is actually a tool of transphobes. That's you and I, anybody that doesn't agree with the activist agenda. And it's meant to decrease the number of out trans people. The family can be replaced, they say. And the main reason that individuals detransition, that means they leave their trans identity, they detransition. The main reason, Gleason declares, is to stay in contact with their family. Yet there are no resources cited. There's no academic research that supports this in the least. But, you can say whatever you want and get away with it, right? The family configuration is now, according to Gleason, shaped by white supremacy. Who knew? Who knew? Capitalism and systemic racism. Boy, it all comes down to that, doesn't it? Well, but they didn't throw in climate change. That would be the other thing there. Anyways, to abolish the family means allowing relations and relationships that have already blossomed, according to Gleason, between individuals in the trans community to become unchecked. Wow, what does that mean? Well, that means that everything goes and there is no check on what people do, how they identify according to any reality basis. So, yeah, all of this is happening right under your nose. Transgenders offer each other, according to Gleason again, prolonged bouts of joy, rarefied skills, and support. Prolonged bouts of joy. What's that about? Transgender individuals are actually the most unhappy, and this is actual research, the most unhappy of all LGBTQ people, and LGBT and all of the acronyms that go with it. Those individuals are far more unhappy than heterosexual individuals. So the transgender offer these supports, rarefied skills, whatever that means. And they say they don't do this in order to create sturdy forms that will outlast generations. Sturdy forms. So they must be talking about family forms. They don't offer support. They don't offer prolonged bouts of joy with one another to actually maintain anything. They just want to have fun. They just want to deny reality, if that's fun, and enjoy moments of community with their fellow exiles, according to Gleason. Are you confused yet? It's about the dismantling of family. So Gleason also says to teens and children too, I guess, if they're listening, that it's okay to walk away from unsupportive parents or disrespectful parents. So if your parents disagree with you, get this, they're unsupportive. Of course they are, because they disagree with you. You know, if you have a child that starts on drugs, you're going to disagree with them. At least most cognizant parent would. You don't want your child to be in the drug culture. But if you disagree with a trans child, then you need to find your glitter family, your queer family, the trans family. That's what Gleason tells teens, because you need to throw away your family and your parents and anything they might say. And they say that the relationships made in the glitter families are just as real as family bloodlines. Really. What happens when someone wants to detransition? Oh, there's a reality for you. They're ostracized, they're intimidated, they're challenged, they're bullied, but it's just like a regular family, according to Gleason. I want to go on and talk a little bit more about someone in Canada. This person is a Canadian competitive cyclist and a transgender activist by the name of Veronica Ivy. And this person also, is a male who identifies as a woman. So biologically a male, born a male, but now identifies as a woman and goes by the name of Rachel McKinnon. So what about this? Well, Ivy, which was the male name, her live-in partner, Danny, Sean Doherty, was charged recently with solicitation of a minor. You see, one of the things that the trans community and actually the whole LGBT community want to suppress is the reality of sexual interference with minors. And it happens, folks. It happens, folks. The breakdown of the social and family structures makes children and teens who feel misunderstood and socially isolated. So particularly those who are more on the autistic side. But every teen feels socially isolated at one time or another. But it makes these teens more vulnerable, and it's changing our culture. The family structure that's being destroyed is changing our culture. And to give you an idea of how that's changing, just last week, a Gallup poll showed that 16% of Gen X's are now identifying as LGBT. The overall percentage of Americans, because the Gallup poll was done in the US, who identify as LGBT is on the rise, and we knew that. And if you're paying any attention at all, it's obvious because we're seeing and being exposed continually in the media to these wonderful relationships, supposedly. But particularly in Generation X, and those are the ones, people born between 1997 and 2002. So 1 in 6 of these individuals are identifying as LGBT. That's horrendous. I'm sorry, folks, but we need to understand that this is going to be a problem. It is a problem, and it's corrupting our children. Well, the vast majority of Americans still identify as heterosexual. The Gallup poll actually, and I'm going to give you some stats here, found that 5.6% of US adults now identify as LGBT. And that's up from 4.5% of adults in 2017 and 3.5% in 2012. You know, according to the survey, this near 16% of Gen X's identify as LGBT, but 9.1% of millennials, so those were the individuals born between 81 and 96, identify now as LGBT. 3.8% of Generation X, those born between 65 and 1980, identify, and just 2% of baby boomers born between 1946 and 1964 identify as LGBTQ. You see, it's on the rise, and why wouldn't it be? We teach our children. We are indoctrinating them from the youngest ages, preschool ages, and now we are seeing what is transpiring. So nearly 3/4 of those Gen Xers who identify as LGBTQ identify as bisexual. Okay, so that means that they will go either way, right? So the confusion that has happened in our culture is destroying families, and it's destroying our children. It's the dissemination of our families that begun in 1950s. Well, kind of 1949 with Alfred Kinsley's research, and it's leading to the annihilation of humanity. Well, that's enough for today. That's not all good news, but we need to be apprised of what is happening out there. Thank you very much for listening.